Hey, twisted people. It's your twisted woman here, Chauncey K. Robinson. And as you can see, I am here with my mother today. So, who is usually across the country when I do this. So, this time she came to visit y'all. She flew across the country safely, of course. We did all the protocols. So, we figured usually we do this and she's in a whole other thing. So, I'm going to try to do this. Side by side, actually. But if y'all are listening, and thank you all who are joining us in the live and those of you who are joining us in the replay section. But if you can help us out by letting me know if you can't hear me properly at all, just let me know, because this is a totally different setup than I normally do. But I want to make sure that my mic is, that you all can hear and everything just fine. So we are projecting, of course. I am projecting. Free Britney as well, if you don't know. So y'all, thank you all who are joining us. Hey, Betty, thanks for joining us in the live chat. I got the natural light on, y'all. It's been a busy day. We've been in the sun. We went out for a picnic, but I really didn't want to have to wait a whole other week to do another episode or whatever, because I'm trying to stay as consistent as I can when it comes to this, even in the midst of the way the world is right now. Thanks, Betty, for the check-in. Hey, Ray. Hey, Twisted and the Original. Yes, my mama. So yeah, y'all, we are doing episode 8 of season 2 of Evil. And so it was a wild ride once again when it came to this episode. I feel like I always love this show because I feel like they throw everything at us in a way but it still stays consistent. It's really good writing. They remember things. There's always a throwback to things. In some shows when you watch it, there's sort of this thing where you almost feel as though there's a little bit of a forgetting of things. They'll bring something up and the next couple episodes is as though it's like, well, do you remember that you did this, or this was the thing that you decided to do? And this is just one of those shows where I do not have to worry about that when I am watching it. Yes, Betty, it was nuts. This was a nutso episode, but also so very good. We're watching Kristen's somewhat of her downfall a little bit. Leland and Sister Andrea going at it. Sister Andrea is a real one. Can we just give it up for the nuns up in this show? And we had the whole thing with the brain machine, because this was B is for brain, right? So this episode was B is for brain, and it was a wild one. And I want to pose some questions to you all when it comes to what we got out of this episode, what you think this episode was. And first and foremost, I want to throw it to you all and ask, if you had to give this episode a grade, what would it be? And I want to throw it to my mom when it comes to what grade she would give it. What grade would you give this lady?
I give it an A. It was good to me.
You gotta speak up for the mic, just to make sure.
It was good to me. I gave it an A.
Yeah. Yes, Betty's Sister Andrea for the win. I would definitely give this episode an A as well. It's so interesting because for me, when it comes to this show, just throwing in a little bit of Ben with his mama up in there. When it comes to this show, I always feel like most of these episodes are top tier. There's really hasn't been an episode yet where I have not liked it. And so it's kind of hard for me to say what's my favorite episode of the season so far, or anything like that. I think all of them are pretty high up there. S is for Silence was so intense, even though it was mainly in silence. And this one kind of just revved it up when it came to the direction, when it came to the things that were happening. So I definitely give this episode an A as well. When it comes to it. And so basically what we had with this episode was we had the brain machine, this cognitive kind of contraption that our trio is sent to check in on, that basically is supposed to treat depression, but it may actually give people who use it a sign from, visions of heaven or visions of hell, depending on what they use. And so, as with all of these episodes, one of the things I want to pose to you all is whether or not this was an obviously supernatural episode, or was this one of those episodes where it could have been anything. I overall, I dug the whole thing about. Well, let's talk about the brain machine first and foremost. Let's dive into that first. The brain machine, which was the overall, and then we can talk about some of the other plots. It wasn't smaller plots, the other plots, especially with Kristen and stuff. So, Ma, do you think I'm going to call it the brain machine. There was a way more scientific term for it. But do you think the machine? What did you think about that? What did you think about the machine and what was going on with it? And do you think it was something that tapped into heaven or hell for the viewer, for people who used it, or do you think it was something like a play on their brain?
I would go for a play on their brain, but then you never know what people's brains are going through. So it could have been something that they, how they saw it. Because at that time, something strapped to your head, what do you be thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, something on my head, and they tell you to count backwards. And, I figure everything go through your head. But
why that? Why something of heaven? Why something of hell?
Well, if I did, it would be something of heaven, because I'm going to think, okay, God's with me or whatever.
But it was something for depression. You get what I'm saying? Like, it was a machine that's supposed to treat people's depression, but for whatever reason, they were having religious experiences.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. But I guess maybe they want, I don't know, maybe, like you said, played on the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But then they trying to prove if it was like a miracle or whatever. Something like that, right?
Yeah, and why the thing when it comes for when it came to what they were going through? Why that?
I don't know.
Do you think a machine like that could exist?
It might. The way technology is today, I think they have something like that.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's a possibility of that? Okay. And I want to know what you all think. Like, do you think that's a thing? And Sabeti is asking, question, were there any in-between stories, neither heaven or hell? I feel like most of them, I feel like what they were doing with the show, Sabeti, was that they were saying either it had something positive. If it was positive, it was some sense of heaven. Mm. And if it was negative, it was a sense of hell. Now, I will say that I think when it comes to it, that there was like Kristen's one, right? That wasn't heaven or hell. Like, she wasn't like condemned or anything. Kristen's thing kind of played on maybe her version of hell is David seeing her as a killer or something like that. And we'll talk about that in a bit. I feel like Kristen's was maybe the only one that was an in-between sort of one. Everyone else's seemed like it was either like some beautiful, joyous thing that made them very much think that they were connected to God in some way. And then you had ones like Ben's, which was so scary. Ben's one was so creepy. The whole thing with the backwards feet, it being a ghost, and then it turning into what it turned into. I would be creeped out too if that happened to me. And we'll talk about that when it comes to Ben and what that means for his story and his faith and things like that. My thought process, and I agree, Sabeti, that was probably very much her guilt and her anxiety. But then the question is, when it comes to those who are dealing with depression, those who had bad thoughts and experiences, was that their own guilt? Was that we all know, not we all know, but there is a thing when people are depressed, they have very depressive thoughts that can be filled with despair and things. So the question is, was the machine kind of playing on their despair? And but then again, you had those who were also depressed, but they had moments of help and healing where they felt as joyful as they had been. But in one case, one guy was like, I had never felt joy like that before in my life after I came out of that. And so there's a little bit of the science there of whether or not the machine just kind of rewired their brains, right? Because there is this question of psychology, of psychiatry, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to depression, that it has something to do with the brain. You know, like people talk about when you have depression, it's an issue of serotonin, and how your brain might not be, a certain part of your brain may not be getting enough serotonin. And that's why you feel depressed, and that's why you feel sad. Same thing with anxiety, that there's a certain thing where there's blockings of serotonin, and this helps when you take a certain drug, it helps the serotonin get there so you don't feel as anxious and things like that. So there's the question on whether or not the machine that these people were in, maybe it just kind of rewired their brain. And for some people, it wired their brain for the better. And for others, it wasn't so good. It made them think they were going to hell. So I feel like that's the science part. And we talked about this in the last live stream where, you know, there were some people, and I've seen people say it online, where as much as they love evil, they want it to be a little bit more overtly supernatural. They feel like it at times toes the line where it's like anything can be open to interpretation, right? Like with the young sister, with the young nun last episode, where she was going through stigmata, but it was like, you know, they never really addressed it. It could have been stigmata, it could have been anything. They just kind of left. And even with this episode, I feel like there was a little bit of, okay, there is something really creepy going on here, but then again, it could just be something messing with people's brains. And I don't know, I felt a little frustrated on that, because it would have been cool to see them dive a bit more into that. What do you think, lady? Did you feel a little frustrated that it wasn't an overt, okay, this is magical, or okay, this is scientific?
No, I just was just watching it.
You're just watching it?
Yes.
So you didn't mind that it was kind of like a little bit, they still kind of toed the line between the science and
because it was like, you know, the way it was doing it, it made you think, okay, is that real? Especially that part when she came to David room, and that little guy had his own
Leland. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
In a way, yeah.
Do you think that was just their brains though? Like, what do you think? Do you think it was science, or do you think there was something supernatural going on with the machine?
I thought something supernatural.
Okay, so you thought it was supernatural. Okay, y'all, can y'all let me know? Let me know in the replay and also in the live chat. Do you think this was supernatural? Do you think the machine was playing on the supernatural, or was it doing something when it came to the brain? Or maybe a little bit of both, right? You know, there's also the discussion. And before I get into that, I want to see what Sabetti's saying. Sabetti's saying, I wondered if the machine was micro-dosing them with a drug, right? I mean,
true.
Was it like introducing something in their brain, or maybe just glitching something when it came to their brains to make, I mean, if it was something that was supposed to treat depression, right? Mm-hmm. Clearly it does something, it taps into something in your brain that's supposed to give you some sort of therapy. It's just like when people take medication, right? You take something, it's supposed to, you know, do something with some chemical in your brain to do that. And there's people who are for and against, you know, medications when it comes to depression and anxiety and other things that people consider mental health hardship and whatnot. So I think that's an aspect of that as well. I think, you know, when it comes to the idea of what the brain can do, right? This almost tapped in for me when it comes to what people might have read about outer body experiences, right? Near-death experiences, where, you know, there's so much research, and let me know in the chat and the replay, y'all, if y'all have heard of this near-death experiences where people have, you know, almost died basically, or died literally, like their heart stops or something like that. And they have something of an outer body experience. And there's been like years of research, I think since the 90s or something, of near-death experiences where people think they experience the afterlife. They experience something like, some people experience heaven. There have been many of the times that somebody experiencing heaven, they feel like they are basked in this white glow of light. They feel joy. They feel like some of them see their loved ones who have passed on. And so there's this idea that there's science, you know, research more so, that says that near-death experiences hint to the idea of an afterlife. Like that's our only way of knowing the afterlife, that comes back and gives us a glimpse. And there's been some near-death experiences where people have felt darkness and things where it's like, okay, did I go to the other place? And so I feel like this episode was a little bit of a play on that, but with the neuroscience, which is, same thing with near-death experience, but with the actual machine as opposed to tapping into people with near-death experiences, where the question with near-death experiences usually is, when someone experiences something like that, are they really experiencing heaven or what they think is the afterlife, or what they are is their brain kind of playing on what they think it might be? When it comes to near-death experiences, though, many people feel like people from all over the globe, different walks of life, have experienced too much of the same kind of encounters to the point where that couldn't just be someone's play on their own experiences because it's so similar, which they think gives people an idea that there may be an afterlife. And so this isn't just a deep cut. I use that for the example of this machine because many of them were having these experiences. And the question is, it's like, maybe it was tapping into something that was beyond their own experience if all of them felt that same way. So I think there's that. And I think there's a chance of that when it comes to, and I like that it played on it. I would have preferred for it to play on it a little bit more, but I did like that it kind of, because those are things we wonder, right? Many people wonder or believe, that there's an afterlife, that there's something beyond, but many of us have no way of telling because people who pass beyond, well, they don't usually come back to tell you if there was something there or not. Near-death experiences are our only way of, cataloging that. And so then you have the same thing possibly with this machine.
But with Ben, remember Ben asked his mother, is this the afterlife? What did his mother say? I thought she said something.
Well, she said he asked her. Ben asked. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into each of their experiences. So the trio had experiences, right? And Ben went first. So Ben's experience was with his mother. Mm-hmm. He cried at the end. It was a whole thing. And we know with this that Ben's been having some issues lately, right? He's been having some moments where he's had guilt over the whole thing with the genetic thing for children that he was involved with. The succubus demon has been visiting him in his dream, which is probably a manifestation of his guilt and whatnot. And so, and I think he's also it's been hinted at that he's had some issues with his mom and, that kind of strained relationship he feels like they had towards the end of her life. And so when he gets into the brain machine, basically he sees his mom, and his mom takes him to the old place where he was born, or like he said, I haven't been here since I was like 9 or 6 or something. And he was like, is this heaven or whatever? And she was like, it could be, and he asked like, well, why don't I see God? Where's God? Because the other people who have been talking to him had said that they saw God. And his mom says, well, you're not going to see God because you don't believe in God. Mm-hmm. And she was like, well, and he was like, well, what do you know? And she even said, she's like, I'm your mother. I know you. You're not going to, even if you did see God, you wouldn't believe it because you're such a skeptic. Yeah. And then she points him to one of the women of the night with the backwards thing. And the woman of the night turns into what she turns into, which was so scary and creepy. And it comes at him. And I was a little confused now because I'm like, well, did he experience maybe his form of heaven a little bit and a form of hell? Like what was coming at him? What did you think of that scene, lady?
That was scary when it was coming, especially when they showed, I said the feet is going backwards and then it and the hands are so creepy.
The hands were very creepy. That was just a creepy.
That just
that was so creepy.
That was so creepy.
So Betty's saying the one girl's description of hell. Yeah, yikes, right? Like when she gets dumped into a thing of tar, and the thing that's looking over her, there's a whole bunch of naked bodies connected to it in pain. Which I think we all have. There's the whole question of what is hell for people. Some people think hell is just fire. And a lot of people think hell can be more psychological. It could be things that get to you, Mm-hmm. Hey, Vera, thanks for joining us in the live chat. As I was saying earlier, my mom's actually physically here with me. She's not across the country. So we're doing this a little differently with us sitting side by side. Yes. Hey, Josh, thanks for joining us. As you were saying, yes, we're together. She's over here across the country. She flew here, guys. Actually, also, y'all, it was my mom's birthday yesterday. That's why she flew over here to visit, because it was her birthday and she's celebrating. Of course, we've been very safe. She flew over here very safely, but she's here physically. So we're doing that. That's why the live stream went up a little late today, because we've been out. Vera is saying, I was thinking the doctor was putting something on their temples, like a hallucinogen. Yeah. And that's what Sabeti was saying, Farah, that maybe there was something going on with the dosing. And this is why it's interesting sometimes when it comes to evil, right? Because sometimes you want them to dive in deeper to things, right? Just like with the stigmata thing last week, and then they don't. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing that happened maybe with this scientist, because he was doing things and he was like, okay, you guys are going to experience. And I felt like maybe they should have revisited him. Maybe why didn't they interview him a bit longer and be like, why'd you get into this? What do you think about this thing? He didn't seem like much of a believer necessarily, but he was more like, I think it was the church that was funding this program. So it was a whole thing of, okay, sure, if that's what gets the church to keep doing it, then fine. Thank you, John, for saying happy birthday, Mama Karen. Vera saying happy birthday. Betty saying, what did it mean when his mom mentioned she would tell Ben to look at their feet when he was little?
Yeah,
I wondered that too. I wondered if that was some kind of old superstition or something like that, like the feet being backwards, like maybe that had some type of association with a ghost or a demon. Yeah. Oh, Josh is actually answering. Josh saying it's a cultural thing to tell you're dealing with a ghost or a demon if the feet are backward. That's what was so creepy to me. I never knew that, actually. And when she said that, I kind of figured it was something like that. But to actually see it, I'm like, whoa, why are they walking like that? What is going on? And it just got creepy real quick. And this is what I love about this show. It keeps the horror factor. Like every episode, there's still something that's very creepy and scary in it. There's not really an episode, knock on wood, that goes by where there's not something that's like, whoa. And Ben's thing was probably the scariest part of the episode to me.
I think so too.
Yeah, but let us know in the chat and also in the replay, y'all, what did you think was the scariest moment of this episode? Because I'm going to go with Ben's experience. I feel like that, and maybe the girls, one of the patients' description of the thing with the tar and the naked bodies, that was also just picturing that was super scary to me. So we have Ben. So Ben experienced kind of hell in a way, heaven with his mom, but also hell, which, could be interpreted that he's at a crossroads. Like maybe the things that, like one of the people, the patients early on said that they had an experience where someone whispered to them, you're going the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then they felt joy. And now they feel closer to God and stuff. So maybe that was also Ben's thing as well too. So that could also be a play on that. And then, so do you think, Mom, that Ben actually had a real supernatural experience? Like that was really his mother and that was really a demon? Or do you think that was a play on Ben's own kind of trauma he's been going through right now with his guilt and his faith, or his lack of faith?
Well, it could be the guilt part too.
Do you think it was mainly guilt?
Yeah, for him to play with Ben, yeah, I think it was the guilt part. But but then lately Ben have been changing too. He's been seeing things.
He's been asking for forgiveness.
Yeah, so it could, in a way, that his subconscious could have just came in on that at that moment, his mother. So he's, thinking back. I mean, everybody's saying that they had this experience. So his experience was with his mother. He saw his mother. And maybe there's some residual guilt of letting her down and whatnot. Yeah, because the way he was asking all those questions with his sister, she said, you really, she must have said something to him. He wanted to know what was Mom's last word. What and she said, say? I didn't want to. Yeah, she didn't want to. So she must have said something. Yeah. So Betty is saying, I think Ben's experience was supernatural. I think there was a hint of supernatural. I think something that's going on with Ben may be supernatural. So maybe it's a play on his brain. But I do think the whole thing, it was interesting, what we were just talking about, how the mother was like, remember I told you, look at their feet. His mom must have had some connection to the spiritual. And maybe that's her trying to break through to be like, hey, there's an aspect that I need you to kind of be more connected to when it comes to faith and things like that.
Jaws is saying, I just want to say I loved how they joked about Ben and Christian seeing things, but David never does, like I mentioned last stream. Exactly. Yeah. That was such a thing. You were very much, you said that last time, Jaws, where it's always the skeptics who see stuff, and David, because he's so strong in his faith, you almost kind of feel like he doesn't have to. Like, maybe that's the whole point of it. Like, he doesn't see those things because he doesn't have to, because he believes without the proofs. And they don't, or whatnot. So it's kind of a thing like that. And so then we had Christian's going crazy, y'all. So we could just talk about Christian's whole thing along with her vision, or her thing with the brain machine. So Christian's getting more aggressive. She's starting to burn herself with the cross.
Oh, yes.
Which, I mean, I feel like that's some kind of, a Christian, I don't even call it, like, I feel like it's some kind of religious kind of form of cutting almost,
like priest used to beat himself.
Yeah, like when priests, beat themselves, conflagration, I think they call it conflagration. And then you have it, so that, but I was also thinking about, there's a thing where people, I'm sorry, this is a trigger warning for anyone. There's a thing called cutting, where, people, when they're depressed or they have a lot of tension or whatever, sometimes they revert to kind of cutting themselves with little nicks, like usually on their arms, as a form of like letting out some kind of stress or buildup and things like that. And so I feel like there's a mixture of that going on. Like you were saying, Ma, her beating herself, but also the cutting, but it's like religious tinged with the cross.
Yes, if they feel that they done something wrong or whatever, they show, just that's their repentance.
Yeah.
Or whatever like that. I ain't burning myself. I said, oh God.
And it seemed like there was something sexual going on when she wanted her husband to keep touching the part that hurt. And it was like, what's going on? Is she like into the fact that she's hurting herself? Is there some sort of like weird, like you're saying, weird like guilt get off or something like that? So Betty's saying, oh my God, how creepy was Christian practicing how to smile? Yeah, she was also trying to go through like, how do I act now that my husband is home? Because she didn't seem very happy that she felt kind of, it seemed like she was off that he was there, because she has been going to the bar. She's been having thoughts about David and things like that. There's a mixture of things going on with her, right? Vera saying, why is her husband going through her diary? That's another aspect. And we'll talk about that, because that was also something I didn't like either. I mean, I know it was kind of like, yeah, something's going on with your wife. Sure. But you're going through the closet and you find something that's clearly her journal. That's not your journal. And you open it and you start reading it. And I know his excuse was, I didn't know what it was, but it was like, well, it's a journal and it wasn't your journal. So before you opened it, you could have just asked her what's in the journal. I mean, it's not even like he needed the journal to tell her that she was acting weird, right? Like there was enough stuff there. She beat up that guy at the supermarket who deserved it, but I wouldn't advocate for that, but he did deserve it, the guy who cut in line. And then the whole wild sex thing with the mask. It was almost like, I didn't even know if the sex thing was because she didn't want to see his face, or she was just really into something kinky. I didn't know what that was about. And she just seems very agitated. Ever since she's killed that guy, she's just seemed more and more agitated. Josh is saying, it kind of makes me wonder if she's still infected, because she had to heat the necklace up herself. Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is, when originally with that cross, you remember when she first tried to cross, it burned. And there was an idea that one was the supernatural thing, that something was going on with her. The other thing was Ben saying, oh, these things can get heated depending on where they're at. And so it wasn't really burning her. But now she's burning them on purpose and putting them against her skin. Mm. So Josh saying, yeah, she liked the pain, I fear. Yeah, there's something weird going on with that. And Josh saying, that's why I don't like her husband. Yeah, Josh, I remember you pointing out actually last live stream, you weren't feeling the husband. I'm still neutral on the husband. I think he's a concerned partner. I think he's a partner that's just kind of like, what's going on with my wife? Although I think his methods of coming out with it aren't the best. I think that's also an aspect of it that's, playing into, they don't have good communication. That's basically what it is. He goes off. It was supposed to be a slow trip. It was supposed to be a quick trip. He ends up staying away for, it seems like, weeks. And then, she's not necessarily happy that he's away all the time, but he seems to feel like he needs to be away all the time. And then he decides, he's like, I'm going to get a job somewhere and you're going to stay home. And I just didn't think that was the best way of going about that. It was like, how about you start with getting the job first? Like, she literally has a job that gives y'all medical. You don't have a job that does that. So how about you figure that out and see how you can make money before you're telling your wife she's going to become a stay-at-home wife and mother. Like, that's a kind of a big thing. So it's kind of like, yes, Kristen is going through stuff. It's very clear she is going through things, but he's not helping. like the husband is definitely not helping. So Betty's saying, I don't care for him, the husband either. Not exactly sure why. Vera is saying the husband is right to sell the business and get a job at home. It's all too much to have to carry a family by herself. Leland made sure she was isolated by starting a relationship with her mother. And having to handle LaRoe alone. Exactly. So there was that. That's what I'm saying. I feel like the husband's heart is in the right place. He wants to do better by his family, but I think he's making decisions without really communicating
and talking to her
with her. And that's not helping because Christian's in a very, very delicate thing. And so with Christian's actual vision, which was funny. It was kind of a bait and switch in a way. They made you think David was going in and that he saw what she did. And in reality, it was her seeing David do that and how she would feel if he knew that she was a killer. Now, I definitely think what went on with Christian, I think that was her brain. I don't think that was necessarily a supernatural thing with her. I think with Ben, it was supernatural. I think with her, it was more so her guilt and her feelings for David. But I think the question I want to pose to you all and to my mama is, do you think Christian is possessed in some way and may not realize? Because then we remember some episodes ago, or I think it might have even been in the last season, David had a vision of Christian heading towards the devil. He did have that vision. So that let us know something was going on there. And do you think she's still possessed, or she's just dealing with like a midlife crisis and like a falling out after killing this guy and dealing with the ramifications? Do you think it's a mixture of stress, or do you think there's something supernatural going on with Christian? And let me know in the chat and the replay, y'all.
I thought she was possessed. I mean, in a way, it seemed like she's possessed or something. But what was that dropped out?
What are you talking about?
When they was having.
Oh, yes. And that was another thing, y'all. When they were having sex, some goo fell out and it burned through the bed, it burned through the floor, and it burned down into the first floor. Now that, to me, when we were watching it together, and my mom was like, what is that goo? And the first thing I thought was, that looks like the same goo that was coming out of the cabinet at the monastery. It was the same kind of goo. So my question, like, so you kind of have to wonder, did she get possessed by the demon that she let out? But the thing is, with Christian, there was already issues going on before that. So it's like, okay, did another thing latch on to her? Was it two? Because she was already going through something that seemed supernatural before then. And then she let out this thing that kind of attached itself onto her as well, and not just the djinn that was on her before. But it was definitely there. And there was definitely something going on with the goo. I don't know what it was about, but I think maybe it was from the monastery. Joss is saying, I feel like that was her version of hell because there's so many takes of it's based around your own fears, guilt, like Lucifer on Netflix. And you might be right about it. That's what we were saying. Like, hell can be personal. You know, it's not always fire and brimstone. That sometimes doesn't necessarily scare people. You know, maybe back in the 1500s or something that did, but now it can be watching someone you care about get hurt over and over again, losing people in your life and things like that. That can be your own personal hell. So that could be a thing that David finding out about that is her own version of, you're doing something wrong here. You need to come clean in a way. You know, maybe that was her brain, kind of like with Ben's mom telling him, hey, you know, something's going on. You need to deal with that because there's a demon here. Maybe that thing with David was kind of like, hey, something's going on. Maybe you need to kind of confess so that this doesn't keep going because you're going down the wrong path. So in that sense, I think it could be supernatural. Yeah, Josh, what was that goo? Like I said, I remember the goo from the monastery. I don't know. Maybe it followed her home because she was the one that spoke. Maybe she was the one the most susceptible to a demon because she was already going through stuff, right? So Betty is saying, it seems like her agitation has increased since being at the monastery when the demon was released, right? And I think maybe something even attached on more to her. Maybe it started out like just an issue where she had guilt for not guilt for killing the guy, because it's very clear she did not feel guilty about killing LaRoe. She did not feel guilty about that. But I think she did feel guilt. She does feel guilty from hiding it from David and stuff. And the fact that maybe she's not in love with her husband like she would want to be. And she feels guilty about that as well. And so maybe that was real guilt that was happening. And then at the monastery, this demon attached itself onto her from that. Sounds like a good theory.
Yeah.
So Betty is saying, funny how she doesn't seem to care about her husband's opinion, but does care about David's. And I think that's what her psychiatrist was saying. He was like, you know, it seems like he's like, your husband's been back for a couple of days now, and and you haven't mentioned him once, but you're all about talking about David. So what's going on? And her therapist straight up tells her, sounds like you got two roles here. Maybe it's manifesting between what your husband represents and what David represents. But then there was also the thing he said, and the funny thing is that what Christian said to that was very funny to me, because it wasn't simply, no, I'm not in love with David. It was more like, well, he's about to become a priest, so I can't be with him anyway. Yeah. I thought that was funny that was really her conundrum. Not the fact that she has a husband, but the fact that David's about to become a priest. And she sees that more of an obstacle than her marriage. So, yeah, there's that. So although I do feel like it came out of nowhere a little bit with the whole thing with them, kind of having to, kind of having that posed there in a way, in a way when it came to that, but it was building up. She definitely has an attraction to David. So it's like, where is this going? And I think David also has some things to deal with. And, let's talk about David a little bit. He didn't feature as prominent in this. He was kind of in the background a little bit. Because he's a man of God, right? He's already got his faith. Although I do hope we do return a bit more to David's visions and his own struggle with becoming a priest and what that means. Like last episode, he was tempted to be at the monastery because he's had a lot of temptation as of late. I think Christian is one of his temptations. And he was like, I could see why people would stay here. I mean, having this kind of solitude, to basically just focus on your faith as opposed to all the chatter in the world. But then there's also the aspect of David coming to the conclusion also that he needs to be out there in the real world because because his gift is to be out there and help people. He could go in a monastery and shut himself off from everyone and just have his visions, but that won't help people. And his whole point of doing that was because he felt a calling to help people, right? So with David this episode, I kind of figured they were going to do that. Let me know, y'all. Did y'all figure that they were going to do it where he wasn't going to have a vision with the thing? I kind of felt like they were going to do it because I felt like they built it up with Ben and Kristen. And I was even waiting for it. I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder what David's is going to be. But then I thought, I'm like, they're not going to have David have one because he has regular visions. They're not going to do it. I think it's going to be one of those, to us, like, no, you're not going to see David have a vision because he doesn't need this to have a vision.
That's true.
What did you think, Maya? Did you kind of expect that we weren't going to get one from David?
No, because like you said, they did that switcheroo. I thought that was really him having those visions, but it turned out that it wasn't. He didn't even get in the chair.
He did get in the chair.
Well, he did get in the chair, but
nothing ended up happening.
No, he didn't. He said he didn't see nothing.
He just counted back and nothing happened, which was very interesting. Johns was saying, which says a lot about David's importance to her, Christian, and I'm happy her therapist brought it up to her. You talk about David a lot here. So Betty is agreeing, right? David is important to her. Vera is saying, still bothers me they never addressed the stigmata, right? That's what I was just saying. This show has a tendency sometimes to leave open-ended stuff, sometimes blatantly, where it's like, wait a minute, you still need to talk about the stigmata. She was drinking the whiskey from last episode that she got, which was a nice throwback to, Essence for Silence. But I thought the same thing when it came to the guy who was doing the brain thing, right? It was the thing of, why don't you interview the actual scientists? Who came up with this? Who created this thing? What were they trying to do necessarily? John saying it's very much, so much a matter of fact for her. It's very telling. Yeah. So Betty is saying, I felt sad for him, David, that he didn't have a vision. Yeah, I think I felt sad too, because I think David wanted a vision. That's been his struggle, right? David's struggle has been that he can't have regular visions without the help of some kind of, hallucinating drug. Yeah. And then he had one kind of couple episodes ago with the dot, but it wasn't God. I think it was the Archangel Michael, who looked scary as all get out. But he had a vision of Michael, who was basically telling him, who are you to talk about the will of God? Like they were gonna type stuff like that, like, whoa. And that was his last vision since then, but it wasn't God, it was the Archangel. So that was telling. And in this episode, he did the whole water thing again. And, he talks to Sister Andrea because he was like, I meant to not do it, but I also kind of wondered if I could and that would do anything. And, Sister Andrea basically said, you got it to, you messed yourself up because that thing probably messed with your brain and you didn't need it. And now you kind of set yourself back up to ground zero. Did you agree with that? That's what Sister Andrea said? Because I kind of felt like, and we got to talk about Sister Andrea in a second, but do you think she was right that it kind of messed with his brain because he didn't really need that to have a vision? And that's why he couldn't do it?
I think so too. That he didn't really need that to have a vision, like you were saying. But she told him that he need to concentrate more on his meditation?
Yeah, concentrate more on his meditation, concentrate more on not needing that assistance. Yes. Vera is saying David can still be a man of God and have a woman. I think that's why they introduced the Black men's group of faith from different kinds of churches. I actually did say that. I said he needs to become a Baptist preacher or something. Like, like pastors and reverends can be men of God, right? And women of God and have wives and children. There's nothing saying he has to become a priest. And I think it would be very interesting if they dive into that. Why the priesthood? Why not become a pastor who can have a wife and kids and still practice the word of God? Why the priesthood per se? One can argue that the priesthood is a bit archaic, and that's why they've had the kind of controversies they've had, because they're not allowed to have sex and things, right? One can argue people have human bodies and human tendencies, sins of the flesh and all that they kind of need to do that so it doesn't manifest in wicked ways, right? So I think they're going to have to deal with that eventually. And I kind of wonder if the show is going to keep dragging it out. But I kind of like that the show doesn't seem to be dragging it out because I think he's supposed to I think he's only a couple of months from taking the oath or whatever. So hopefully it doesn't get dragged out, but I think they do really need to eventually address that issue because I don't think he needs to become a priest. I think he can still be a pastor and things. Maybe he wouldn't be able to work with the Catholic Church though. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason why that might think. So Betty is saying, honestly, I was kind of surprised he had nothing, that he didn't have a thing. And yes, the angel did scare us. Vera saying he wants it so much, but that is another reason that I think Kristen and Ben were drugged and maybe he wasn't. I think the doctor might be influenced by Leland. That could also be a thing. Make him question his relationship with God. Yeah, because, right now, David feels like God has gone silent on him. So there's that. Jaws is saying, I feel like she was right, but he was like Sister Andrea was right, but he was already struggling with getting vision. So I don't understand how it set him back. And so Betty's saying, Sister Andrea wants David to focus on his prayer and meditation to hear God's will. Yeah, to do it naturally, to not be dependent on something. And, let's talk about Sister Andrea because she's cool. We love Sister Andrea. And for those watching, I am showing a little bit of a photo of her and Leland facing off. Leland, we got a little glimpse of Leland. We didn't get him at all last episode. I like Leland. I like Leland in doses. I'm glad that they're not showing him all the time, because I think it would become kind of the Leland show and kind of gimmicky if he was already around. We got a glimpse of him in Christian's vision of him eating David's hand, which was so random, but and it was interesting because when he opened the door, he's like, "Oh, hey, Christian, you can help me finish this with David. We need to eat his hand." I don't know if that was symbolic or something of how maybe she's helping to pull David away from God or something with his temptation. But so we had Leland come in, and Leland has figured out some episodes ago. Leland has figured out that Sister Andrea used ammonia and that it wasn't real holy water. And as Sister Andrea pointed back out, yeah, your exorcism, she put it in quotes, because she also said this is a mockery. You're not really having the exorcism. So I used ammonia, which wasn't really holy water. And they kind of had this really cool face off in the kitchen. I thought that was so funny because Leland is so into dangerous, deranged women. And it was so funny when he left out, he was so shook that Sister Andrea was not at all bothered by him, to the point where he was like, "I don't think you give the nuns enough credit. They're hot." And then he like leaves out. And I just thought that was great. Yeah, I agree, Vera. Sister Andrea is an OG. She is definitely gangsta when it comes to it. So Betty is saying, for some reason, he is drawn to Catholicism, David, which does differ from other forms of Christianity. Believes in transbutan. Can you pronounce that, Mom? Transubstantiation. I'll get it right. And the Immaculate Conception and the use of exorcisms. That is definitely a thing. The Baptist Church does not do exorcisms and things like that. And that's probably, it goes a bit deeper, right? Jaws is pointing out, that Leland was not expecting her energy at all. And he was not. And I think they are so formidable because you have Leland kind of being this, like, I like Leland. Like I said, I really do actually enjoy this character. So you have Leland being who he is. And now you have he's met his match with Sister Andrea. And Sister Andrea seems to be very aware that something's going on with Leland and that there's a battle. Yeah. And I guess my question to y'all, and I'm going to pose it to my mom here, is do you think Sister Andrea is supernatural of some sort? Do you think she's like an angel in disguise or some kind of miracle worker? Or is she a regular nun? Because I kind of get the vibe, because it's very interesting to me how she's so knowledgeable and stuff. And maybe that's just like what she says, where people are always paying attention to the men in Catholicism, but not the women, the nuns who know so much. I mean, we saw that last episode where the real miracle going on was with the young nun, with her having the stigmata, but they were paying attention to the dead guy and trying to make him a saint. And we have this again where the person who's probably the most knowledgeable to help David is a nun. Yes. And so I kind of wonder, though. I'm like, Sister Andrea seems very knowledgeable of things, but she also seems very worldly. Like, she used ammonia. She kind of gets Leland's tricks, and she's not showing her hand of supernatural. But I also think that maybe there is something going on. And I'm wondering, I would love it if it was, but knowing this show, they'll probably leave it very ambiguous and vague of whether or not she's supernatural. But I think she is, because she seems to know that there's a battle going on. Yeah, because she told David, you have to prepare. Yeah, she don't trust Leonard because he's up to something. Yeah. Yeah. Sabeti is actually, thank you for that, Sabeti, for giving the definition of the word, which means that Holy Communion is not just symbolic. The belief is that Jesus is actually present in the host. Yeah, Catholicism is deep, y'all. I mean, I am so intrigued by religion and spirituality and stuff. So it's always, interesting to me. I lean more Baptist and spiritual than Catholicism, but I think Catholicism has a lot of interesting works about it and whatnot. So there's that. And Sabeti is putting her bet in the ring, which is that I feel like Sister Andrea is supernatural. I agree. I think Sister Sabeti. I think Sister Andrea is supernatural. She knows a bit too much to be just kind of regularly there. So Betty is saying, I am somewhat a lapsed Catholic, LOL. No judgment here. You know, your expertise in some of this is greatly appreciated. So you know, I think she's supernatural too. Joss is saying, yes, not supernatural herself, but knows Sister Andrea is not supernatural herself, but knows there's more of this world. So she definitely knows more than they're letting on. She seems really in tune. Exactly. And she seems to really know, like, you need to practice and things like that. So I'm really loving that dynamic with them. And it was just great seeing that kind of play off of her and Leland. And I'm hoping we see more of that. It was so funny. And Leland was turned on and he could not, he was just like, what's going on here? Like, you got to give the nuns more credit. Like, they're hot. You know, I love that. It's such a weird show. I love how weird the show is, but how well written it is, that you don't really expect the characters to be acting the way that they do. Even with Kristen, I mean, her plot line is actually very intriguing to me, because I do wonder if Kristen is under some type of infection or if she's just having a breakdown, you know, if there's something more going on, you know. Okay, so what else happened this one? And there was one other thing with Christian's mom. She's still doing the thing with Eddie. That's the name of the doll, right? The name of the doll is Eddie. And at some point, we got to find out who Eddie is, y'all, because she's just randomly praying to this doll. I don't know what it is. Is it a demon? Whose side is the mother on? I think that's the question. I feel like in some way she's on her daughter's side, but I don't know if she's on her daughter's side, if she's on Christian's side to get her to move to the good side, or if she wants Christian to descend into something else.
To the darkness or something like that.
You know, do you think, and that's my question with y'all. Do y'all think something's going on with the mother that's evil? Or do you think, you know, she's, you know, maybe there's some weird awakening she's going through, although she's praying to a doll and kind of influencing the daughter a bit, Lexi. So there's stuff going on. So Betty's saying, oh my God, her mom is bananas. Her mom, something's going on with her mom, and I'm wondering when that's going to come in fruition. I mean, this show is very good at having some stuff play in the background, but it remembers it, right? They never forget about it. They leave some stuff really ambiguous and vague, but then there's other things that they always kind of remind you is still happening. And this thing with her mother is one of them, but I don't know what. Like, I have no idea what's going on with her mom. I'm so perplexed at where this is going. Where do you think this is going? And let me know in the replay and also in the chat, y'all. Where do you think this is going with the mother? Who's controlling her? Who's Eddie? Is Eddie some being that's going to come into play here? What do you think? What's going on with the mom?
Well, she did something that the father looked at her with.
It was she looked at the thing and was like, no, okay. Like, talking to things. And he's like, yo, you okay? Like, what is it? Who is this? Like, what is this thing here?
That was so funny. And she even laughed at that.
She's saying she laughed and she thought something was funny, as though Eddie knew something that was going on that he just informed her of. So I think we're going to see who Eddie is eventually. I just don't know who is Eddie just yet. So Betty is saying, I think her mom definitely wants the husband to go. I think definitely.
Yeah,
I think
she don't like that.
She's not here for the husband. She thinks the husband kind of holds her back. Vera is saying, I think the mother is on her own side. But the question is, Vera, what does that mean? You know, what's the mother's end game? She hasn't talked to Leland, right? She hasn't told Kristen about Leland. And she's just kind of there right now. So is there something else going on with them? You know, what's her side? What's her end game? I think that's the question. But you may be right. She may be in it for whatever, but who's this Eddie that she's connected to? And what's he's, you know, maybe he's the next guy she's dating. I don't know. Joss is saying, I just need them to be more obvious about the supernatural side of the show. It's like Lucifer before it left Fox. Very vague and subtle hints, just waiting for it to really kick in. And, you know, this is what we've been talking about, right? Like, and I see people saying that where the show toes the line. And sometimes I like that the show toes the line because we can have these kind of debates, right? About the brain machine, about whether the brain machine was playing on people's own versions of hell and heaven. Because I don't know if everyone had caught it, but I was talking about NDEs, which is near-death experiences, right? And how there's a thing with near-death experiences, which, people who do this research think that it's a scientific way almost of knowing that there's an afterlife. Because people who have NDEs, near-death experience, have very similar experiences. But other people think, oh, it's just a play on the mind of what people want to happen. And I feel like the brain machine in this episode is also a play on that. And I think it's a very interesting debate to have. But I do agree with you that sometimes I do want it to be more obvious because I want to know what I'm looking at sometimes, right? Because the brain machine, I'm okay with that being vague. But when it comes to whether or not Christian is infected or if she's just having a breakdown, I kind of like to know if she's possessed so we know what we're looking out for here. But maybe that's why the show is like that, because it wants to keep us on our toes to not know when they're going to throw the supernatural in. Even with Sister Andrea, I'm like, is she supernatural or is she just a nun who kind of knows things? Like what's going on? I think this is another question I want to ask you all. Do you think David is really having visions? I think he's really having visions. I think he's really had visions of God. But with the fact that it's gone quiet since he can't do it again, sent from years ago, the question is, did he ever really have a connection? Or maybe that was his own faith.
True.
I mean, I think it's cooler that it's real, but I feel like maybe the show's kind of making it so it goes quiet to kind of make us start to question if he's really connected to God or some visionary, which is kind of deep if you think about it. So Betty is saying, is Eddie going to turn into Chucky, right? If Eddie starts talking and moving around, y'all, I'm going to love it, but I'm also going to think it's a little cheesy. I think Eddie, Josh is saying, I think Eddie is a little demon in that doll. Vera is saying, I think Eddie told her about Christian. I think the question is, what did he tell her though? And that's the question. Does her mom know that that Christian's being haunted? And if so, why isn't the mother trying to help her daughter? If you think your daughter is descending into you'd help me, wouldn't you? When my mom, when we were younger, me and my brother, she would come in our room and sprinkle oil on us, y'all. We had a Baptist/Wicca upbringing. And this lady would take me to candle shops and get spells and potions, and we'd, pray to Jesus and of course and everything. But she'd also be putting potions on us. I remember my brother would say one time, "Lady, I told you about coming in my room. Mom, I told you about coming in my room, sprinkling this oil over this blessing oil." But that's what you do. You try to save your kid's soul.
Yes, she do.
Yeah, that's what she do that all the time. I think it worked. But it's kind of weird that the mom is kind of just letting Christian descend into this chaos.
I know sometimes I wonder if she just know that she's going into that direction, and not saying nothing.
Yeah, exactly. It's you have to wonder. So Betty is saying, I didn't think David was until he saw the angel. Yeah, it was a question because he was using the thing. And you're like, well, is he really having visions? Or maybe it is people do hallucinate when they take mushrooms, I guess. And you had to wonder. But they did say he did have a vision before the mushrooms, but he couldn't get it back. So then he started taking it. And he has had visions that did lead to stuff, right? Even with the mushrooms, he had a vision that led to the whole thing with the babies and stuff. So his visions come true to some degree. So I feel like they're based in something, but it's so weird that everything's gone quiet for him. And I hope that they address that at some point. Clara's like, the oil. Yes, but we do the oil. I still got the oil, y'all. I got oils. We do oils here. I'm a spiritual woman, thanks to this lady. But I believe in this stuff, to an extent and everything. Yes, I know my mama loves me. Yes. Josh is saying, yes, I truly believe God and other angels are sending him visions, but I think he's standing in his own way because he's doubting his connection to it all. Yeah, I agree. And I wonder if it has something to do with him about to become a priest, should he do it? Maybe an angel or someone's going to come to him like, hey, maybe you don't join the priesthood. Maybe you instead do other works because maybe the Catholic Church has its own thing. Because we also, before we close it out, the Catholic Church David suggested for them not to use the technology, right? That happened. David suggested for them not to use the technology. Christian, for whatever reason, said, sure, it seems to help depression, so let them do it, even though she had the vision she had. And then Ben was like, I'm not really sure. He's like, I haven't been able to sleep since then. So all three of them were all three of them had different opinions. Yeah. Yet the Catholic Church, the father, said, okay, we're still, just give it to me. He's like, well, why not use it? I mean, just because it has some negative things, I mean, sometimes if that's what gets people to believe, then that should be okay. And I want to ask y'all, do y'all agree with the father? Did y'all agree with the priest that, even if it had a negative connotation, like if you saw hell, and if that gets you to believe in God and go on the right path, that's not a bad thing? Kind of like negative reinforcement? What do you think, lady?
No.
I mean, it's literally putting the fear of God in people, right?
Yeah, making you believe that if you don't, do this is what God gonna do to you and everything. No.
But in a way, isn't that why some people tend to come into spirituality? Because they are afraid of what might meet them on the other side or what meets them here on earth.
Yeah, but you gotta figure out how you live on your life on this earth and how you do things. I mean, come on, we don't, like you said, we don't know what the afterlife look like or hell look like, but we know that wrong is wrong, good is good.
But I'm saying, like, the brain machine, the father was saying, the priest was saying, hey, even if people are having visions of hell and it's not all rainbows and sunshines and God, that's okay, because it still gets them to believe that there's something more and they should have faith. And I guess the question is that a good thing to put the fear of God in people instead of the love of God in the people?
I don't think it's a good thing, because I always thought that was so wrong. In the sense, it's wrong to make you think that God is, he's not about loving you. He want fear. He don't want you to have fear.
Well, in some versions, I think it was, the Old Testament? God was a vengeful God. That's what they had him saying. He was a vengeful God. So I don't know. I think it depends. Catholicism and, Christianity in general has played on that, fear and love, that dichotomy or whatever. Yeah. So that's an interesting concept. John's saying, and it's funny because Christian brought that up earlier about the church trying to use the helmet to persuade people. Exactly. So Betty's saying the hierarchy and bureaucracy of the Catholic Church will use what they want. That's exactly it. There's a lot of politics in the Catholic Church when it comes to the Pope and all of that, to be honest, right? And that's my reasoning for thinking David shouldn't join the priesthood, because we saw that with the whole thing of him being a black priest, and how when he was trying to give a sermon on racism, the other priest made sure that there was not a lot of people at church that day. So, I mean, he's going to run into problems. But then again, the question is, do you not do something because you're going to run into problems? Maybe he wants to do it because he wants to change the church, right? And he thinks he can do that by joining it. But, Vera is saying many people turn to God when life is at its worst. That's very true.
That's true.
Sometimes it takes the worst for some people to
realize about God.
So the question is it okay that the helmet, it's literally making people experience the worst in their mind to get them to do that. So I think in their case, I guess it would benefit them. I think it is kind of sucky that they're doing it with patients who are just trying to get cured for depression, though. I mean, people are depressed enough. They don't need to be having visions of hell.
What they think is hell.
I mean, could you imagine you're already depressed, and then on top of that, you're like, and I'm going to hell for eternity. Great. Like, that's not going to help anybody. I don't know. Seems a little weird. Okay. Was there anything else that we've missed of this episode? I think we kind of covered everything. I would give this episode an A. Y'all, I'm really loving where this is going. I kind of want to see Leland's endgame. There's so many different plot lines going on right now, and I'm really curious to see how it all comes together.
Because I'm more curious with the nun. I mean,
Sister Andrea.
Yeah, and she's telling David something that he have to be more prepared because what's coming. So she knows. I think she knows what's coming, and it surrounds David.
Yeah. I feel like David's going to play a very big role.
Yeah, because
that's why he's kind of been playing the background a little bit while Christian and Ben are going through this stuff. Because I think towards the end of this season, David's going to emerge to have to play a very pivotal role and stuff. What, we don't know, but
Because what did he say to the nun? He said, you just don't know who you.
Yeah, Leland was like, you don't know who you're dealing with or something like that.
And
then
she just looked at him like,
like, well, now we've been introduced. Like,
yeah,
like,
she did that so calm. I like
she's not afraid, which is great.
She's not.
Sabetty saying, I thought it was an A as well. I agree, Sabetty. I think this was an A episode, and
with her knife.
And next episode looks just as crazy.
Oh, yes.
So much stuff is happening in next episode, y'all.
That's gonna be a good one.
It's definitely gonna be one to take on. Because I'm like, yo, where else can this show go right now with everything? It is culminating. How many episodes are in this season?
Oh,
isn't it like 13 or 14 episodes? So we're pretty much midway through season 2 at this point. I feel like we got maybe 6 or so more episodes to go. So a lot of stuff's probably going to start popping off. We'll see. What's going to happen to Christian's soul? Will David be able to save her? Will David and Christian ever act on their underlying relationship and lust with each other? Should they? Is another question. At this point, I don't think Christian is any good for David. I know I said I was kind of putting it. I love their chemistry. I do think Christian and David have great chemistry, but as their characters stand right now, they would not be good for each other. Clearly, Christian's got to get her stuff together, and I don't think David needs that baggage right now. So that's my opinion on them, y'all. But let me know in the replay what y'all are thinking about that. Do you ship Christian and David? Do you ship anybody on this show? I haven't seen Ben's girl for a minute now. The one he met from the Ghost Hunter, she hasn't been around. So I guess they stopped seeing each other.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, y'all, it's been real. So Betty is saying, I don't want Christian and David together right now. I agree with you.
I don't either.
I don't think they were. I think Christian's got to get her stuff together. She's a married woman. She's got to figure it out.
Yeah.
I think they need some time. I'm for slow burns, and I'm more for if they end up getting together, I'd be for it in like season 5 or 6 after she's divorced and they've been kind of dealing with each other regularly for like maybe 2 seasons or something.
Yeah.
Not right now, not at all. It would be tainted if they acted on their feelings right now. So, all right, y'all. So that's our live reaction review of Evil. Episode 8, B is for brain. I love that opening too, where the brain plops down on the thing.
Thing with the book.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell this show is on streaming now because they even let Christian say the F word. So they're letting them curse and stuff now, and the sex and all that. It's getting a lot more risk. It's definitely, they're like, oh, this is a live stream. This is a streaming show now. It's definitely not CBS network or whatever. Josh is saying, I feel like they're leading towards Christian leaving her husband and David leaving the church. I think that is where it's going, but I don't want it to be for negative reasons. I think, if they end up doing this thing where they maybe become independent investigators or something or whatever, that it should be because it's a positive, not because Christian's having a breakdown and David is having a lack of faith necessarily, But yeah, thank you all so much. It's been great having my mama here, safely, of course, y'all, and y'all should stay safe out there. It was a Labor Day weekend and everything. Keep your mask on. We believe in masks here and vaccines here. Yeah, y'all, thank you so much for talking these stories with us. And until next time, let me know your theories down in the comment section. And I am super excited for next episode. But until then, stay safe out there and stay loving stories and watching Evil. Talk to y'all later.